All right, good afternoon, and firstly, thank you everyone for coming today, and I extend a particular thank you to ANU staff and academics that are here today as well. We are, of course, here to listen to a public lecture by Professor John Minford. And most of us are all aware that Professor Minford first came here in 1977 to do his PhD, and came back for a year in 1993 for research, and finally came back in 2006, where he undertook a teaching post where he became the president of the China and Korea Center. The fact that he has only been here for 5 years and he will be speaking to you in front of a full house today, I mean standing room only, is indicative of just how influential Professor Minford has been to students and colleagues alike here. I'm pretty sure I can speak for all of us when I say that we all know how hard it is to study Chinese here. And we all come mid-semester and end of semester to think about throwing it away, but we also remember that when we attend a lecture by Professor Minford, be that on the I Ching or the Art of War or the Story of the Stone, we find ourselves forever interested in what he has to say and how he has to say it. Professor John Minford is one of the world's most eminent translators of Chinese to English and English to Chinese. An incredibly difficult task, a task that he, for the past 44 years since he started learning Chinese at Oxford, has continued. And one of the great difficulties of being a translator is not just translating the language, but also translating emotion and how he's going to present the emotion of a text. For example, the Story of the Stone. The emotion of the Story of the Stone for us people who cannot read Chinese as fluently or as perfectly as he does. And his translations of classic Chinese texts of centuries old, millennia old, are just wonderful, and it inspires us to continue to study Chinese. It inspires us to be like him. So without any further ado, I present Professor Minford.
Thank you, Nick. I have to correct you on one point of detail. I've never translated into Chinese, and I wouldn't dare to do so. But it's a nice thought. Thank you very much for coming. It's such a beautiful afternoon. I'm actually amazed that anyone came at all. I almost didn't come myself, because I walked out there and it was just such an amazingly beautiful afternoon. I've been told that everyone is just coming here to listen to me ramble, so that's good, because that's pretty much all I can do. But then I thought to myself, well, that is the title of the first chapter of my very favorite book in Chinese, the book of Zhuangzi, or Master Zhuang, is just called Rambling. So please forgive me if today's talk is pretty rambling. I've got a lot of things that I wanted to say, and I'm not quite sure what order I'm going to say them in, but I'm sure that you will help me choose. But first of all, I just want to say that I was very touched when members of the ACYA, whatever they're called, Politburo, asked me to give a talk, but they're really energetic, wonderful people. They sort of say things like, would you give a talk? What's the title? And what are you going to say? And they give you like 1 minute to decide. So it's called Seeking the Dream, but I've honestly forgotten which dream, and I certainly didn't find it. So just take that as a sort of throwaway title that I gave Marie when she had a pistol to my head. Then I thought of other titles, and you can go on making titles forever. The Vision of China, etc., etc. So ignore it all, really, and let's just sort of take it as it comes. I did put this rather beautiful picture on the front, because it sort of sums up, really, whatever it is I'm going to say, and I don't know what that is, but it's somewhere in that picture. And I'm afraid some of your faces are familiar. You've been coming to my course, so you'll probably know all my stories, and it'll be a real disappointment. You're very welcome to leave. And if it's a story that I've told 3 times, you can put your hand up, and but I'm trying not to repeat myself, but it does get harder with the years. This painting is a classic landscape painting that's in the wonderful collection in the National Palace Museum in Taipei. It's not a very good reproduction, but it's basically a painting of a person. I mean, it's so small you can't see them. That's the way it always is with Chinese landscape paintings. And he's right there in the heart of the picture, in a sort of thatched hut, reading probably the I Ching or something, and just breathing in the landscape. And you can read the blurb there. It's all about the energy of the landscape and how he's at one with the universe, and so on and so forth. And in a sense, that's the overarching theme of my talk. It'll keep sort of coming back. That's what we really can get out of studying China, studying Chinese, not necessarily how to further, Australian investment in the booming economy of the People's Republic. That's not really what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about the things that China has to offer, which are universal and which are part of our shared humanity. And a lot of what I'm going to say is going to sound incredibly corny and pretentious, but I do probably mean it. I've got about 3 different ways of organizing this talk, so I'd probably jump from one to the other and try and connect them. But I thought I would begin, as I've already begun, by thanking ACYA, and they're saying what a wonderful group of people they are. Since they were founded, I was sort of involved in the early stages of supporting this wonderful initiative. I think it's a really outstanding group of people, and they're doing a wonderful thing. And it's so great that it's sort of spread out all over Australia, and it's just so full of good energy. I'm very proud of it. So I thought I'd begin by sort of telling my story, because I probably won't ever get another chance. And so you're a captive audience who's going to have to listen, however sort of appalling it is. How did I come to study Chinese, and why? I'm basically not an academic at all. I'm what they call a reluctant academic. I'm a failed, whatever the thing I was that I wanted to be, musician, theatre director, stagehand. That's what I wanted to do, something far more interesting and creative, but basically I had to earn a living, and putting stage props on the middle of the stage wasn't really supporting my family. So I became an academic somewhat reluctantly. I chose Chinese, and I didn't actually choose Chinese. Chinese actually chose me, because I'd spent 2 years at Oxford, which isn't that good a university. I mean, people think it is, but it's actually rather a mediocre university. I mean that. And I spent 2 years there, reluctantly being a student, and the only things I enjoyed doing were directing plays, which I still enjoy doing, and playing music, which I also enjoy doing. And after 2 years, I'd sort of changed subject about every semester. I did Latin and Greek, history, English, politics, philosophy and economics, which is all one degree, and none of them interested me, really. At the end of 2 years, I thought, this is ridiculous. I've only got 2 more years of my student grant. I must choose something that's really what? I must choose something that's really important, something that I really want to do. And then I was just outside the library, the Bodleian, in the middle of Oxford, and I remember the exact spot. I sat down on a little stone wall and thought to myself, now, decision time, what do you really like? And I just couldn't think what I liked, except for trees. I really like trees. I like sort of just hugging trees. So I just thought, right, trees. So I had the book of Oxford courses, and I looked up forestry, because I thought, right, I'm going to be a forester. Because I like trees, I want to spend the rest of my life with trees. So I got to page, whatever it was, Bachelor of Forestry. And of course I had to have biochemistry, botany, physics. I would have had to spend another 3 years getting all the science subjects that I never had, because I just did Latin and Greek at school, which is really antiquated. I'm a real fossil. So I couldn't do forestry. So that was my last shot at making a choice. Then I thought, well, I can't make a choice, so why don't I just abandon all logical processes and just, put a pin in the book, which is what I did. I put a pin in the book, and it landed on Chinese. Now, why on earth would I want to study Chinese? This was 1966. The Cultural Revolution was just about to start, and no one was studying Chinese in those days, very few people. Anyway, I went the next day to the Chinese department, which was tiny, and they seemed really friendly people. And you know, I started this whole spiel about why I thought Chinese was important. I had no idea why it was important. You know, and you know, I twisted their arm. They said, "Well, you're very late starting. It is a 4-year degree. You're going to have to do it in 2 years," and blah blah blah. But I mean, you know, by the end of that morning, I was enrolled in the Chinese program, and that's how it started. And now, of course, I'm translating that wonderful and impossible book, the I Ching, the Book of Change. And I realized that what I was doing was, in fact, a time-honored form of divination. I was just opening my life to the unexpected and allowing, you know, whatever you want to call it, to intervene. I don't regret it at all. I think it was something that changed the course of my life. And 44 years later, I'm standing here, not really knowing what to say, but there we are. That's how it started. Being a student didn't really suit me at all. My favorite poem was a poem by Matthew Arnold called The Singologist, and I've actually put it on page 2, so you can actually follow the words. It's about it expresses a mid-Victorian sort of disenchantment with the material world, one of the recurring themes of Matthew Arnold. And the lines that I've chosen are, it's a long poem. It's about a student at Oxford who basically drops out. And it says, "Come, let me read the oft-read tale again. The story of the Oxford scholar poor of pregnant parts." That doesn't mean I was going to have a baby. I mean, it means that pregnant parts means someone with sort of lots of ideas. Of pregnant parts and quick inventive brain who, tired of knocking at preferment's door, one summer morn forsook his friends and went to learn the gypsy law, and roamed the world with that wild brotherhood, and came, as most men deemed, to little good, but came to Oxford and his friends no more. I identified very, very strongly with that poem. And as a result, when I got my degree, I promptly dropped out and wasn't heard of again for about 7 years. This is the next important point. This was the mid-1960s. Now, I don't think there's anyone else in the room who was even alive then, you know. But it was the most formative, magical time to be alive. And I wasn't in San Francisco either. I was in Oxford, boring, middle-class, straight-laced Oxford. But even Oxford could not help but be influenced by the waves that were sweeping the world, you know. I had a long list of things I was going to talk about, which ranged from sort of Pink Floyd to, I don't know. But I mean, it was an extraordinary time to be alive, and we were all caught up in it. One of the great gurus of the time was a man called Aldous Huxley. Those of you who were at my lecture at 12 o'clock, please forgive me. Aldous Huxley actually went to my college at Oxford, Balliol College, and he was one of my great heroes. He wrote wonderful novels, but he also later in life emigrated to California and sort of started taking mescaline and LSD and all sorts of other interesting psychotropic substances, and wrote wonderful books such as The Gates of Perception, The Doors of Heaven and Hell. And when he was lying on his deathbed, he said to his second or third wife, I can't remember, whose name was Laura, who was a psychotherapist, and she wrote a wonderful book about this. He said to Laura, as he was literally dying, he said, "I want 2 tabs of LSD." And he died on a trip. He was just, he was so happy. And Laura jotted down all of his rambling thoughts. And those were the days. And that was 1963 when Aldous Huxley died. The 60s were a wonderful time to be alive. All my friends were consulting the I Ching. They didn't have the faintest idea what it meant, but they would consult it to decide whether to have bacon and eggs for breakfast. And sometimes they would consult it, you know, whether or not to hurl a saucepan across the kitchen. I once was staying with friends who did that. So my interest in the I Ching goes straight back to the mid-60s, when it was a cult book. Everybody read the I Ching, you know. In those days, they were very large copies. I've since come down to the smaller ones. And it's a book that's accompanied me. It's the book that really was my first Chinese book, and it still is my one of my preoccupations. And I keep thinking I'm nearly finished with the translation, but it keeps telling me I'm not nearly finished with it. So I have